I sold my old cottage. The buyer wanted to meet me. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. It was the daughter I gave up 40 years ago. She bought the place where I last held her. The cottage by the sea had been mine for 43 years. I bought it when I was 22 years old, barely more than a girl, with money I had saved from working double shifts at a diner in town. It was small and run down, with peeling paint and windows that rattled in the wind, but it had a view of the ocean, and that was all I needed. I thought I would live there forever. I thought a lot of things back then that turned out not to be true. The decision to sell came gradually, the way most painful decisions do. It started with the stairs. They had always been steep, but lately they felt like climbing a mountain. Then it was the isolation. The cottage was a 20-minute drive from the nearest town, and I no longer drove at night. The winters were getting harder. The loneliness was getting heavier. But those were just excuses, really. The truth was simpler and more complicated at the same time. I could not live with the memories anymore. Every room in that house held a ghost. The kitchen, where I had made tea at 3 a.m. because I could not sleep. The bedroom, where I had lain awake listening to the sound of the waves and wondering if I had made the right choice. The small nursery I had painted yellow, the one I had closed off the day after, the one I had not opened in 40 years. I called a realtor in March. Her name was Susan, and she had the kind of relentless cheerfulness that made me tired just listening to her. She walked through the cottage with a measuring tape and a clipboard, making notes about the hardwood floors and the ocean view and the potential for renovation. She said it would sell quickly. People loved seaside properties, she said. Charming, she called it. A hidden gem. I nodded and said nothing. The house went on the market in April. Susan was right. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 offers. I accepted the highest one without looking at the name. I did not care who bought it. I just wanted it to be over. The buyer's lawyer contacted me a week later to arrange the closing. Everything was proceeding smoothly, he said, but the buyer had made one unusual request. She wanted to meet me in person before the sale was finalized. She wanted to see the house one more time, with me there. I almost said no. I had been planning to move out before the closing, to leave the keys with Susan and never look back. But something in the lawyer's voice made me pause. He said the buyer had been very specific. She said it was important. She said she had personal reasons. I agreed to meet her on a Saturday afternoon in early May. I spent the morning cleaning the cottage, though I'm not sure why. It was already empty. I had moved most of my things to a small apartment in town, keeping only the furniture that was too old or too heavy to bother with. But I swept the floors and wiped down the counters and opened the windows to let in the sea air. Maybe I wanted the house to look its best one last time. Or maybe I just needed something to do with my hands. She arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. I heard the car pull up, the crunch of gravel under tires, and I felt my stomach tighten with inexplicable anxiety. I told myself I was being ridiculous. This was just a transaction, a polite formality, nothing more. I opened the door before she could knock. She was standing on the porch, backlit by the afternoon sun, and for a moment I could not see her face clearly. She was tall, taller than I expected, with dark hair pulled back in a braid. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, and she carried a leather bag over one shoulder. She looked to be in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, confident, composed, and then she stepped into the shade, and I saw her eyes. They were green. Not just green, but the exact shade of green that I saw every time I looked in the mirror. The same green my mother had, and her mother before her. A particular green, like sea glass or moss after rain. I had not seen that color in anyone else's eyes in 40 years. My hand went to the doorframe to steady myself. "Mrs. Hartley," she said. Her voice was warm, polite. "I'm Anna Reeves. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." I could not speak. I just stared at her, at those eyes, at the shape of her face, the line of her jaw, the way she held herself. I searched for other similarities, for proof that I was not imagining things, and I found them everywhere. The small scar above her left eyebrow, the way she tilted her head slightly when she spoke, the slender fingers that looked so much like mine had at her age. "Mrs. Hartley, are you all right?" I realized I was still standing in the doorway, blocking her entrance. I stepped back quickly, too quickly, and nearly stumbled. "Yes. Sorry. Please, come in." She walked past me into the cottage, and I caught a faint scent of lavender and something else, something I could not name, but that made my chest ache. She stood in the center of the living room, looking around slowly, taking in the bare walls, the old furniture, the view of the ocean through the window. "It is beautiful," she said quietly. "Even more beautiful than the photos." I closed the door and stood there, watching her, trying to breathe normally. My mind was racing. It could not be. It was impossible. I had spent 40 years trying not to think about her, trying not to imagine what she looked like, where she was, if she was happy. And now she was here, standing in my living room, and I did not know what to do. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, because it was the only thing I could think of to say. "That would be lovely, thank you." I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on with shaking hands. I could hear her moving through the house, her footsteps slow and deliberate, as though she were memorizing every detail. I tried to calm myself. I was being ridiculous. Lots of people had green eyes. It was a coincidence, nothing more. But I did not believe that, not for a second. I brought the tea out on a tray, 2 mismatched cups, and a small pitcher of milk. She was standing by the window, looking out at the ocean. She turned when she heard me, and she smiled, and my heart broke a little. We sat down on the old couch, the one I had bought second-hand 40 years ago, the one I had nursed her on in the middle of the night, during those 3 impossible days I had been allowed to keep her. "This house means a lot to you," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. "I have lived here a long time. 43 years, according to the deed." I looked at her sharply. "You researched the property." "I did." She took a sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving mine. "I wanted to know its history. Who lived here? What happened here?" She paused. "I am a journalist. I research things for a living. It is a hard habit to break." "I see," I said, though I did not. We sat in silence for a moment. The sound of the ocean filled the room, the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks. It was the same sound I had fallen asleep to every night for 4 decades, the same sound that had both comforted me and haunted me. "Mrs. Hartley," she said finally, setting down her cup, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My hands tightened around my cup. All right." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She opened it and took out a piece of paper. It was old, creased, official-looking. She handed it to me. It was a birth certificate, not an original, but a copy. The baby's name was listed as Female Hartley. The mother's name was listed as Elizabeth Hartley. The date of birth was May 12, 1983. The place of birth was Seaside Cottage, Cliff Road. My hands went numb. The paper slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the floor. "I was adopted when I was 3 days old," Anna said, her voice steady but tight. "My adoptive parents were wonderful. They gave me a good life, a happy childhood. I never felt the need to search for my biological family. But they passed away 2 years ago, and when I was going through their things, I found my adoption papers. And I found this." She picked up the birth certificate from the floor and held it carefully, as though it were something precious and fragile. "It took me a long time to decide whether I wanted to know more," she continued. "Part of me thought it did not matter. I had a family, I had a life. But the other part of me, the part that asks questions for a living, could not let it go, so I started digging. I found records, I found addresses, and I found this house. I could not breathe. I could not think. I could only stare at her, at this woman who was a stranger, and not a stranger, who was sitting on my couch, holding proof of the worst and best day of my life. When I saw that this house was for sale, she said, I knew I had to buy it. I did not know if you still lived here. I did not even know if you were still alive. But I had to see it. I had to stand in the place where I was born, where my mother lived, where she made the decision to give me up. She looked at me, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I had to meet you. Anna, I whispered. It was the first time I had said her name out loud. I did not even know if it was the name I would have given her. I had not been allowed to name her. They told me it was better that way. Easier. Is it true? She asked. Are you my mother? I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her she had made a mistake, that she had the wrong person, that I was just an old woman selling a house. But I could not. I had lied enough. I had carried this secret for 40 years, and it had nearly destroyed me. I could not carry it anymore. Yes, I said, and the word came out broken. Yes, I am. She closed her eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. When she opened them again, tears were streaming down her face. Why? She asked. Why did you give me up? It was the question I had been asking myself for 40 years. The question I had answered 1,000 different ways in my mind, trying to find one that made sense, one that made me less of a monster. I told her the truth. I was 19 when I got pregnant, I said. Your father was a boy I met at college. We were young and reckless and in love, or at least we thought we were. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared, just vanished. I found out later he had dropped out and moved across the country. I never heard from him again. Anna listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. I came home to tell my parents, I continued, but they did not react the way I hoped. My father was furious. He said I had shamed the family. My mother cried and told me I was ruining my life. They gave me 2 options, get an abortion or leave and never come back. I paused, the memory of that conversation still as sharp as a knife after all these years. I could not do it, I said. I could not end the pregnancy. I do not know if it was moral conviction or fear or stubbornness, but I could not. So I left. I took the money I had saved, and I bought this cottage, and I moved here alone. I worked at the diner until I could not hide the pregnancy anymore, and then I stopped going out. I stayed here, by myself, and I waited. You were alone the whole time? Anna asked, her voice small. Yes. I had no one, no friends, no family, no support, just me and this house and the ocean. I looked around the room, at the walls that had witnessed my loneliness, my fear, my desperate hope that somehow everything would be all right. I told myself I would keep you. I told myself I could do it. I would work, I would manage, we would be fine. But then you were born, and I held you, and I realized I could not. Why not? Because I had nothing, I said, and my voice cracked. I had no money, no job, no help. I was barely surviving. I was eating 1 meal a day and wearing the same 3 outfits because I could not afford anything else. And you were so small, so fragile, so perfect. And I thought, how can I give you the life you deserve? How can I feed you, clothe you, keep you safe, when I can barely take care of myself? I wiped my eyes, but the tears kept coming. So I called an agency, I said, and I told them I wanted to give you up for adoption. They came 3 days later, 3 days. That was all I had with you, 72 hours. I held you, I fed you, I memorized every part of you. And then they took you away. And I sat in this house, in that bedroom upstairs, and I cried for weeks, months, years. Anna was crying too now, openly, her shoulders shaking. Did you ever try to find me? No, I said, and the word was like a stone in my throat. I wanted to. Every single day, I wanted to. But the adoption was closed. I had signed papers saying I would not contact you, that I would not interfere in your life. And I thought, if I did find you, what would I say? Sorry I gave you up? Sorry I was not strong enough? What good would that do? You had a family. You had a life. I did not want to disrupt that. But you thought about me. Every day, I said. Every single day for 40 years. I wondered where you were, what you looked like, if you were happy. I wondered if you hated me. I wondered if you even knew I existed. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could not read her expression. Then she reached into her bag again and pulled out a photograph. She handed it to me. It was a picture of a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with dark braids and a gap-toothed smile. She was sitting on a swing, laughing, her face lit up with pure joy. "That is me," Anna said, "with my mom and dad. They took me to the park every Sunday. We would spend the whole afternoon there, just the 3 of us. They were good parents. They loved me." I stared at the photograph, at the happy child I had never known, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and grief. "I am glad," I said, and I meant it. "I am so glad you had that." "But I also had questions," she said. "I always wondered why someone would give me up. I used to make up stories. Maybe she was too young. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she did not have a choice. I tried to imagine scenarios where it made sense, where it was not just that she did not want me. I wanted you," I said fiercely. "I wanted you more than anything. But wanting is not enough. Love is not enough. I learned that the hard way." She nodded slowly. "I believe you, I do. But it still hurts." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry. I am so, so sorry." We sat there in silence, 2 women bound by biology and separated by time, trying to find a way to bridge the gap between us. "Why did you buy the house?" I asked finally. She smiled, a sad, small smile. "Because I needed to understand. I needed to see where I came from, to stand in the place where you made that decision. I needed to feel close to you, even if I never met you. And when I saw it was for sale, it felt like fate. Like maybe this was my chance to know you, even if it was just through the walls of this house." "And now that you know?" I asked. "Now that you have met me and heard the story, what do you want?" She looked at me, and I saw my own eyes looking back at me. "I do not know," she said honestly. "Part of me is angry, part of me is sad, part of me understands. It is all mixed up, but I do know one thing. I am glad I met you. I am glad I know the truth." "So am I," I said. We finished our tea in silence, and then she stood up to leave. I walked her to the door, my legs unsteady, my heart heavy. She paused on the porch, looking out at the ocean. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Where will you go?" "I rented an apartment in town," I said. "Small, quiet, close to everything. It will be an adjustment, but I think it is time." She nodded. Then she turned to me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. "Can I hug you?" she asked. I could not speak. I just opened my arms. She stepped into them, and I held her the way I had held her 40 years ago, when she was just a tiny, fragile thing that fit in the crook of my arm. But now she was tall and strong and whole, and she held me back, and I felt something inside me that had been broken for so long start to mend. We stood there for a long time, 2 women on a porch by the sea, holding on to each other and letting go at the same time. When we finally pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me the truth, for being honest." "Thank you," I said, "for finding me, for giving me this chance." She reached into her bag one more time and pulled out a business card. "This is my email and phone number. If you ever want to talk, or get coffee, or just sit in silence, call me. I would like that, if you would." I took the card with trembling hands. "I would like that too." She walked to her car, and I watched her go. She turned back once, waved, and then drove away. I stood on the porch for a long time after she left, watching the ocean, feeling the wind on my face, listening to the waves. The cottage was still mine for a few more weeks, until the closing was finalized. But it did not feel like mine anymore. It felt like it belonged to her, to the daughter I had given up, to the woman she had become. And maybe that was the way it was always meant to be. A month later, I moved into my apartment in town. It was small and bright and full of new furniture that did not carry any memories. I liked it. It felt like a fresh start. Anna called me 2 weeks after that. She invited me to dinner at the cottage. She said she had been working on renovations, and she wanted to show me what she had done. I almost said no. I was afraid of what it would feel like to go back, to see my old home transformed into someone else's space. But I wanted to see her again. So I went. The cottage looked different. She had painted the walls, replaced the old furniture, added plants and artwork and light. It looked warm and lived in and loved. But it was still the same house, the same view, the same sound of the ocean. She had set the table in the small dining room, candles and wine, and a home-cooked meal. We ate and talked and laughed, and it felt both strange and natural, like slipping into a rhythm we had never had the chance to establish, but that was there waiting for us. After dinner, she showed me the rest of the house. She had turned the small nursery into an office, with a desk and bookshelves and a window overlooking the sea. She said she was writing a book, something she had always wanted to do but never had the time for. "What is it about?" I asked. "Mothers and daughters," she said. "The choices we make and the things we carry." I looked at her, and I felt a swell of pride so strong it nearly knocked me over. "That sounds beautiful," I said. "I hope it will be," she said. "I hope it does justice to the story." We went back to the living room, and she poured us both another glass of wine. We sat on the couch, the same couch we had sat on that first day, and we watched the sun set over the ocean. "I am glad you bought this house," I said. "So am I," she said. "I'm glad you found me." "So am I." We sat in comfortable silence, and I thought about all the years I had spent in this house, carrying the weight of my decision, wondering if I had done the right thing. And I thought about Anna, the life she had lived, the person she had become. And I realized that maybe there was no right or wrong. Maybe there were just choices and consequences, and the fragile, imperfect ways we try to make peace with both. "Can I ask you something?" Anna said. "Of course." "Do you regret it? Giving me up?" I thought about that question, the one I had asked myself 1,000 times, and for the first time, I had an answer that felt true. "I regret the circumstances," I said. "I regret that I was alone and scared and did not have anyone to help me. I regret that I did not get to watch you grow up, to know you as a child, to be your mother in all the ways that matter. But do I regret giving you to a family who could give you the life I could not? No, I do not regret that, because you are here and you are whole and you are happy, and that is all I ever wanted." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I needed to hear that." We stayed until late, talking and sharing stories, and slowly, carefully, building something new. Something that was not quite mother and daughter, but not quite friends either. Something in between, something ours. When I finally left, she walked me to my car and hugged me again. "See you next week?" she asked. "Next week," I said. And I meant it. Over the months that followed, Anna and I settled into a routine. We had dinner together once a week, sometimes at the cottage, sometimes at my apartment, sometimes at a restaurant in town. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her work, her friends, her life. I told her about mine, about the years I had spent alone, about the ways I had learned to survive. We did not pretend to be something we were not. We were not a traditional mother and daughter. We had missed too much, lost too much time. But we were something. We were two people who shared blood and history and a small cottage by the sea where everything had changed. One day, almost a year after we first met, Anna told me she had finished her book. She asked if I wanted to read it. I said yes, even though I was terrified of what I would find in those pages. She gave me a printed manuscript, and I read it in one sitting, curled up on my couch with a cup of tea and a box of tissues. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and honest. She wrote about adoption, about loss, about the mothers who give up their children, and the children who spend their lives wondering why. She wrote about forgiveness and understanding, and the complicated, messy ways we try to make sense of our lives. And she wrote about me, not in a way that was cruel or accusatory, but in a way that was honest. She wrote about the young woman who had lived in a cottage by the sea, who had made an impossible choice, who had carried that choice for 40 years. She wrote about meeting me, about learning the truth, about finding a way to bridge the gap between anger and understanding. When I finished reading, I called her. "It is perfect," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It is absolutely perfect." "You are not angry?" she asked. "Why would I be angry?" "Because I wrote about you, about us, about something so private." "No," I said. "I'm grateful. You told our story in a way I never could. You gave it meaning. You gave it a voice." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," she said finally. "That means everything to me." The book was published the following spring. It became a modest success, not a bestseller, but well-reviewed and widely read. People wrote to Anna, telling her their own stories of adoption, of loss, of mothers and daughters trying to find their way back to each other. She shared some of those letters with me, and I cried reading them, recognizing pieces of my own pain and hope in the words of strangers. We are still building our relationship, Anna and I. Some days it feels easy, natural, like we have known each other forever. Other days it feels awkward, like we are strangers trying to find common ground. But we keep showing up, we keep trying. And slowly, carefully, we are creating something that is ours. I'm 72 years old now. I have lived a long life, much of it alone, much of it marked by regret and sorrow. But I have also lived to see the daughter I gave up become a woman I am proud of. I have lived to hold her again, to know her, to be a part of her life, even if it is not in the way I once imagined. The cottage by the sea belongs to her now. She has made it her own, filled it with light and life and love. Sometimes when I visit, I stand in the doorway and remember the girl I was, the impossible choice I made, the tiny baby I held for 3 days before letting go. And I think about how strange life is, how circular, how the places we leave always find a way to call us back. Anna bought the house where I last held her, and in doing so, she gave me something I thought I had lost forever. She gave me a second chance, not to undo the past or to pretend it never happened, but to acknowledge it, to honor it, and to move forward together. And that, I have learned, is the closest thing to forgiveness any of us can hope for.